You can tell a lot about a person by what they do when other people are watching. Some people become warmer, some become fake, and some become cruel in very specific ways. Not because you did anything terrible, but because your presence does something to them that they don't know how to handle. That's what we're talking about in this video. Why insecure people humiliate you in public. Not just insult you, not just disagree with you, not just act rude. Humiliate you, correct you in front of people, mock you in front of people, expose something unnecessary in front of people, make little jokes at your expense in front of people, suddenly change their tone the second there's an audience. And if you've experienced that, you know how confusing it can be, because sometimes the same person who acts normal with you in private becomes strangely disrespectful in a group. And that shift matters, because public humiliation is rarely random. It usually tells you something about what your presence is stirring up in them. Carl Jung would probably say that people don't just act from who they think they are. They act from what is unresolved in them, especially when that unresolved part gets triggered. So when insecure people humiliate you in public, it's usually not just about the joke, the comment, or the moment. It's about what they need the audience to do for their ego. That's the deeper layer. They need to lower you so they can feel higher. They need to control the image. They need to protect themselves from comparison. They need to discharge the discomfort your presence creates in them. And once you understand that, a lot of painful experiences start making more sense. Because this kind of behavior usually isn't about truth. It's about emotional self-protection. And unfortunately, insecure people are often willing to embarrass someone else just to avoid feeling small for a few seconds. So let's go straight into it. 1. Public humiliation is often a shortcut to power for insecure people. The first thing to understand is this: when insecure people feel small, they look for quick ways to feel big. Not real confidence, not inner stability, not self-awareness, just a fast emotional lift. And one of the fastest ways to do that is to lower somebody else in front of witnesses. That's why public humiliation feels different from private criticism. Private criticism can at least pretend to be about honesty. Public humiliation is often about theater. It needs the room, it needs the audience, it needs other eyes on the moment. Because the insecure person isn't just trying to say something to you, they're trying to change the social atmosphere. They want everyone to feel, even for a second, that they are above you, that they are sharper than you, funnier than you, smarter than you, more dominant than you, less affected than you. And if they can get a laugh, a reaction, or even a little social discomfort around you, it gives them a temporary hit of relief. That relief is important, because insecure people often live with an inner sense of deficiency. They don't feel steady in themselves. So instead of building real self-respect, they look for moments where they can rearrange the emotional hierarchy in public. That's why the humiliation can seem so unnecessary. Because it's not usually about solving anything, it's about self-medicating through social control. Jung might say this is the ego defending itself in a primitive way. The ego feels threatened. So instead of becoming conscious, it attacks outward. And the quickest outward attack is often social. Embarrass the other person. Make them look awkward. Make them look small. Control the room. That's why some people seem almost energized after making someone else uncomfortable in public. What you're watching is not strength, it's compensation. And honestly, once you really see that, their behavior starts looking less powerful and more revealing. 2. They humiliate you in public because your presence activates comparison. A lot of insecure behavior starts here. Comparison. Not healthy comparison, not inspiration. The painful kind. The kind where someone is standing next to you and instead of simply being with you, they start measuring. Your confidence against theirs, your looks against theirs, your intelligence against theirs, your presence against theirs, your social effect against theirs. And if that internal comparison doesn't go in their favor, something starts happening inside them. Now they feel threatened. Now they feel less visible. Now they feel less impressive. Now they feel emotionally smaller than they want to feel. And if that feeling gets strong enough, they may try to rebalance it publicly. That's where the humiliation comes in. A joke, a correction, a dismissive comment, a subtle insult dressed as humor, a story told at the wrong time for the wrong reason. It's not random. It's often a reaction to feeling outshined. And here's the thing, you do not have to be showing off for this to happen. Sometimes all it takes is you being calm, confident, liked, grounded, present, attractive, talented, or simply not insecure enough to make them feel comfortable. Jung understood that people are often most disturbed not by arrogance, but by qualities in others that expose their own undeveloped parts. So if your presence reminds them of something they haven't built in themselves, they may not experience that as neutral. They may experience it as pressure. And if they are not mature enough to handle that pressure inwardly, they push it outwardly, often in front of people, because public humiliation gives them a quick way to shift the emotional balance. Now the room is looking at you differently for a second. Now they get to feel less inferior. Now the comparison hurts less, at least temporarily. That's why some of the most humiliating people are not confident people. They're deeply comparative people. 3. The audience matters because insecure people need witnesses. This is a big one. A lot of people who humiliate others in public don't even behave that way one-on-one. That tells you everything. Because if the issue were really honesty, accountability or concern, they would bring it to you privately too. But they often don't. Why? Because the audience is part of the reward. Without witnesses, the humiliation loses some of its function. There's no social leverage, no image control, no public reversal of power. That's why insecure people often wait for the room. They wait for the group setting, the family gathering, the workplace meeting, the dinner table, the social circle. That's when they make the comment. Because the public setting gives the act meaning. Now it's not just about hurting you. It's about positioning themselves. Jung would probably say this is the persona at work. The insecure person is performing a version of strength for the group. They need to look sharp, untouchable, superior, funny, in control. And one cheap way to create that image is to make somebody else the object of discomfort, especially if that somebody is you. So when someone humiliates you publicly, don't just focus on the words. Notice the stage they needed. Notice that the room mattered, because that tells you the act was never just about communication. It was about social self-construction. They were building themselves in front of witnesses, and they used your discomfort as material. That's ugly, but it's true. And once you realize that, it becomes easier to stop personalizing every detail of the attack, because now you can see the deeper motive. They needed the room more than they needed the truth. 4. Humor is often how insecurity hides cruelty. Let's talk about the jokes, because a lot of public humiliation comes dressed as humor, and that's what makes it hard to confront. They say something disrespectful, something cutting, something exposing. Then they smile. Then, if you react, suddenly you're the problem. It was just a joke. You're too sensitive. Relax. I didn't mean it like that. But a lot of humor is not innocent. Sometimes humor is a socially acceptable disguise for hostility. It allows a person to discharge resentment while staying protected. Now they get to insult you and still pretend they're harmless. That's why this kind of behavior is so common among insecure people. They don't have the courage to be honest. They don't have the maturity to deal with their feelings directly, so they turn them into entertainment. And if the room laughs, even awkwardly, they get rewarded. Now their insecurity has found a socially approved outlet. Jung might say this is another form of shadow leakage. The person doesn't want to admit the aggression consciously, so it sneaks out through sarcasm, teasing, irony, or playfulness. But the body usually knows the difference. You can feel when humor is warm, and you can feel when humor has teeth in it. That's why some jokes leave you feeling exposed instead of connected, because they were never meant to create closeness. They were meant to lower you while giving the other person plausible deniability. And insecure people love plausible deniability, because it lets them wound without fully owning the wound. So if someone keeps humiliating you as a joke in public, pay attention. The joke may be fake. The insecurity usually isn't. 5. They want to control how the room sees you before the room sees you clearly. This is one of the darker reasons. Sometimes insecure people humiliate you in public because they are trying to get ahead of your impact. They feel your presence. They notice how people respond to you. They sense your confidence, your calm, your intelligence, your warmth, your attractiveness, your weight in the room. And before that fully lands with other people, they try to shape the narrative. So they make the joke first, call out something first, undermine you first, create a slight weirdness around you first. Why? Because if they can frame you early, they feel safer. Now, people are not just seeing you directly, they're seeing you through the little distortion that insecure person introduced. That's strategic, even when it's unconscious, and it happens all the time. A person notices that your presence has gravity, so they try to interrupt it before it settles. Jung would probably say that the threatened ego moves quickly when it feels a shift in the field. It doesn't want to wait and see. It wants to protect itself immediately. So it uses what it has: tone, humor, social cues, subtle disrespect, premature criticism. Anything that can change the room's emotional orientation toward you. And honestly, once you notice this pattern, it becomes so obvious. Some people don't humiliate you because you were weak in that moment. They humiliate you because they sensed your strength and wanted to get in front of it. That's a very different thing. It means the attack is not evidence that you lacked value. Sometimes it is evidence that they felt your value too strongly. 6. Insecure people often humiliate the people they secretly admire or envy. This is one of the most confusing dynamics, but it's real. Sometimes the person humiliating you is not just irritated by you. Part of them may actually admire you. That's what makes the energy feel so mixed. They watch you, notice you, maybe even stay close to you. But then they say something cutting in public. Why? Because admiration mixed with insecurity often turns toxic. If someone admires something in you that they have not developed in themselves, that admiration can quickly become envy, and envy is hard for many people to tolerate consciously. So instead of saying, "I feel small next to this person," or "I wish I had what they have," they attack. Not always openly, often sideways, a public joke, a dismissive comment, a weird correction, a subtle attempt to puncture your image. Jung understood this very well. What people love and hate in others often points to disowned parts of themselves. So if you embody something they long for but haven't integrated, confidence, discipline, charm, emotional stability, beauty, talent, self-respect, they may not know how to hold that cleanly. And because they don't know how to process the admiration consciously, it mutates into resentment, into mockery, into public humiliation. That's why sometimes the people who embarrass you most publicly are also the ones most strangely focused on you. They're not indifferent, they're activated, and activation without maturity often turns ugly. 7. Humiliation is sometimes a punishment for not shrinking yourself. This one hits a little deeper. Because sometimes you didn't actually do anything except refuse to make yourself smaller. You didn't laugh too hard at their joke. You didn't act less capable. You didn't tone yourself down enough. You didn't keep your light soft enough to protect their comfort, and some insecure people punish that, not consciously maybe, but emotionally. Because your refusal to shrink makes them feel more exposed in their own shrinking. So they try to push you down socially. That's why public humiliation often happens after moments where you are most naturally yourself. You're speaking well, looking good, relaxed, respected, not overcompensating, not begging, not dimming. And suddenly, here comes the comment. Because some people can only feel okay if the room has a certain emotional order, one where they are not forced to confront their own insecurity too directly, and if your presence disrupts that order, they try to restore it, usually by making you smaller. Jung would say that consciousness is disturbing to people invested in unconscious comfort. If you are carrying yourself with more self-possession than they can tolerate, you become disruptive just by existing honestly. And immature people often respond to disruption with ridicule. It's one of the oldest defense mechanisms there is. So if someone humiliates you after you simply showed up as yourself, understand something. Sometimes you are being punished for refusing the role they needed you to play, and that role was usually smaller than who you really are. 8. They humiliate you publicly because they can't regulate private discomfort. This is another important layer. Emotionally mature people can feel insecure and still not act cruelly. They can notice comparison and stay decent, feel threatened and still stay respectful, feel envy and still remain responsible for themselves. But insecure people who haven't developed emotional regulation often leak their discomfort into other people, especially in real time. If they feel small, somebody has to feel smaller. If they feel exposed, somebody has to feel awkward. If they feel insecure, somebody has to be destabilized. That's the pattern. And public humiliation is one of the quickest ways to transfer discomfort. It's basically an emotional relocation. I don't want to feel this, so now you will. That's why these moments can feel almost impulsive. A quick jab, a sudden exposure, a harsh comment with weird timing. Because the person is not really processing what they feel. They are ejecting it. Jung would probably connect this to unconscious possession. The person is not standing above the feeling. They are being run by it. And once that feeling grabs hold, shame, inferiority, resentment, the easiest move is often social aggression. Not because it solves anything, but because it gives them momentary relief. And again, that's important to understand. Because when you see public humiliation for what it often is, displaced inner discomfort, it stops looking like strength. It starts looking like emotional illiteracy. 9. If the room allows it, insecure people get bolder. This part matters too, because public humiliation doesn't only reveal the insecure person, it also reveals the environment. Some people do this because they've learned the room will let them. The family will laugh it off. The friend group will stay quiet. The workplace won't challenge it. The audience will reward the performance. That social permission matters, because insecure people often test what they can get away with. And if they find a room where nobody checks the behavior, they get bolder, more cutting, more comfortable, more public. This is why some people seem much more humiliating in groups than in private. The group gives them cover. Jung might say the collective can amplify the shadow just as easily as the individual can hide it. A group can normalize things that would feel ugly one-on-one. Mockery, exclusion, subtle cruelty, status games. And insecure people often become braver when the group energy supports their false power. That's why if you've ever been humiliated publicly, it's worth noticing not just the person who did it, but the people who made it easy, who laughed, who stayed silent, who acted like it was normal. Because public humiliation is rarely only about one insecure individual. It often tells you something about the whole emotional environment. And that matters, because sometimes the lesson is not just that person is insecure. Sometimes the lesson is, this room is not safe. 10. The deepest reason. Humiliating you helps them escape themselves for a moment. At the deepest level, this is what all of this comes down to. Insecure people humiliate others in public because for a brief moment it helps them escape their own inner world, their own inferiority, their own shame, their own fear of not being enough, their own self-contempt, their own insecurity. For a second, if they can make you the uncomfortable one, they don't have to be. For a second, if the room is looking at you, they don't have to feel looked at from within. That's the real reason. And it's deeply sad when you think about it, because it means the cruelty is not coming from true strength. It's coming from somebody who cannot sit peacefully with themselves. Jung would probably say that anything disowned in the psyche eventually looks for expression. If a person has not made peace with their own inadequacy, that pain will search for an outlet. And one outlet is humiliation, a public attempt to reverse the feeling, to make the self feel bigger by making someone else feel smaller. It never lasts, of course, because false superiority is fragile. But in the moment it gives them relief, and that's why it keeps happening, until they become conscious enough to stop needing other people's discomfort as medicine for their own. So why do insecure people humiliate you in public? Because public humiliation gives them something they don't know how to build inside themselves. A sense of power, relief from comparison, temporary control, image repair, a way to discharge shame, a way to punish what your presence makes them feel. It's not mature, it's not strong, and it's almost never really about the surface moment. It's about the inner reaction they're trying to escape. And once you really understand that, something changes. You stop reading every humiliating moment as proof that there was something wrong with you. Sometimes the real issue is that your presence touched something unresolved in them. That doesn't make the behavior okay, but it does make it clearer. And clarity matters, because clarity helps you stop shrinking, stop over-personalizing. Stop trying to earn respect from people who only feel tall when someone else is bent over. And before I leave you, here's the question I want to ask you for the comments section, because I know this topic is going to hit home for a lot of people. What was the first sign that someone was trying to humiliate you in public? Was it the jokes, the sudden corrections, the change in tone when others were around, or something else? I think a lot of people are going to have a very specific memory come to mind with that one. And honestly, those stories help people feel less alone. If this spoke to you, comment, "It was never really about me."